So as I was saying recently, I went to a movie theater to see two movies one day that I just never heard of. They were on the list at the AMC, and the AMC that I went to, I think it's like 16 screens or maybe even more than that. So you know they have to fill the screens, and it can't be Guardians of the Galaxy on every screen. It can't be the Marvel movie on 10 screens after the first, opening weekend. So I saw the list of what this was, and I sort of saw the plot, but I didn't really remember it. And I'm like, I'll go see this new Ben Affleck action thing, whatever. And then somebody else said, oh, it's directed by Robert Rodriguez. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It's funny that I hadn't really seen a trailer for this or heard of this at all. So I went to see HYPNOTIC, starring Ben Affleck and directed by Robert Rodriguez, and also with William Fichtner as the bad guy. And boy, was it not good. Yeah, if you hadn't told me Robert Rodriguez had anything to do with this, I would never have guessed it, because Rodriguez always had this really strong visual style, kinetic style of action and comedy and things like that. And this is just really indistinct stylistically, let's say. What is this movie about? This is, Ben Affleck is a man who is suffering long-term PTSD or trauma or depression because his daughter was just disappeared one day. Playing in a park, he looked away for a moment, he looked up, she was gone, and we don't know why or who took her, and he's a cop, and it's just driving him nuts. So as the film opens, he's telling his therapist about this, and then a bank heist is in progress, and he goes with his partner to deal with the bank heist, and then things get weird. Now, I'm not going to tell you the whole story. William Fichtner shows up at this bank heist, and he just says things to people, and they go off and do things. It's like he's a magician or a hypnotist, or he's a hypnotic, and he can just say things to people and he's like, hey, take a rest, and they go and they lay down in the middle of the street in front of a train, that kind of thing. So suddenly, again, I'm going into this movie blind, so suddenly I'm like, oh, okay, so this is like a sort of a supernatural kind of action thriller. Okay, that's cool. That's one of the cool things about going into a movie blind and not knowing anything, is that things that should be a surprise in the story as the story unfolds are. Otherwise, if you know the trailers and you read about movies and you see multiple trailers and TV ads and interviews, you wind up more or less knowing everything that's going to happen, and things that should be a surprise in a movie aren't. So I like going in blind and having this kind of experience. So I went in with no preconceived notions at all. I went in just wanting to maybe see a fun movie, which I think is why most of us go to the movies. And it just wasn't good. It was just really silly, and Affleck looked like he would preferred to have been somewhere else. And I'm sure part of that was just the character he was playing. But as I'm watching this and realizing, wow, this movie is really kind of bad, I'm just thinking, wow, I can't imagine that was a total mystery to him at the time either. So anyway, so you've got Ben Affleck and this woman he hooks up with, who is another, the HYPNOTIC apparently was this government program for people who had really strong powers of persuasion or hypnotism or something like that. And they were just like this elite team, and somebody went rogue and all this kind of stuff. So Fichtner's the bad guy, and the daughter is apparently this huge key to this thing, and they're trying to Fichtner's trying to find the daughter, and Ben Affleck's trying to protect her and find her first and battle Fichtner, who can just say things to people and they jump off buildings and stuff. And it's one of those movies that is like, okay, it's fiction, it's a movie, it's fake, and it's supernatural in nature, so the rules are going to be not, real life, obviously, but even within the movie, the rules don't always make sense. Like, you just say a word to somebody, and it's not just like, it's like the Jedi mind trick thing for the full duration of this movie. It's not like you say something and they repeat it, okay, cool. Or it's not like you say something to somebody else and they do exactly what you asked them. You just say a subtle thing and they automatically do what you're thinking. I guess that's the level of these hypnotics, is that they're so good they can do that. It just didn't seem like it had much in the way of rules, and kind of made it up as it went along. It felt like a million other things. It really was very indistinct. It just really wasn't very dynamic or that great. It wasn't shot that great. It wasn't executed that great. It was just goofy, and it just kind of kept going. And it was trying to be kind of heavier and more, not important, but more impactful than it really was. I just thought it was kind of lame, honestly. So if you love Ben Affleck, maybe, but probably not. If you love William Fichtner, he's good as a bad guy. He's always good as a creepy bad guy. He's in it, but otherwise, this was just totally forgettable. Like, there's so many movies have been made, every year for as long as movies have been made, and only a few rise to the top, and that's what we remember. We can say, oh, well, such and such a period was a great time for movies, or that was a great year for movies, and it's like, well, you remember the good ones, but there were probably about 100 others that were really not very good and nobody remembers. So this is just kind of falls into that category. It's a film that a major star made that it's a small company put it out. I couldn't even tell you who released this thing. Look down below in the titles if you want to see who released it. It was cool to be able to see this in the theater. This is this weird thing I have. It was neat to be able to see a not good movie in the theater, to just be like, yeah, they still release movies with major stars that get into theaters that ain't that hot. And that's same as it ever was, but it in theaters now, or on video or streaming whenever you watch this. Hypnotic.